try this one more time. I tried this once before and it failed on me, so let's push through and hope that the signal holds up. So I found the story interesting, which is why I'm doing this story, and I guess, you know, I don't necessarily say I have to. It's like in Scott Pilgrim saying this is the beginning of the song. You don't really have to say this is the beginning of the song. But Bernie Sanders and the Democrats, or in this case Elijah Cummings, Ro Khanna, there's a few others, have signed on to sweeping bills to try to lower prescription drug costs. Now, all things being equal, I would say there's no chance for this at all. It's 0%. But there will be some people who are Sanders supporters, who I completely disagree with, that believe that Donald Trump would potentially sign something like this if it was able to ever get through a Republican Senate. So assume for the moment that he gets through a Republican Senate that Donald Trump will put his name on the legislation in order to pass for lower drug costs. I am magnificently skeptical of this. There's been nothing that has taken place that would get that across. And regardless of the rhetoric that Trump puts out, that rhetoric is just lies as easily as breathing. So that doesn't really mean anything that he says something about it. But that said, he's also given lip service to this thing of taking troops out of Syria and got to the point where it seems that whatever agency he had, it's kind of like, I think the thing's called Dave, where the president is just somewhat of a puppet. But even as a puppet, when he says something, it carries a certain weight because the American public doesn't know that he's a puppet, giving him more strength. I guess it's something to that effect. But what it boils down to is they're talking about importing drugs from Canada, and they're talking about essentially tethering our drug costs to the drug costs that are in other countries. Meaning the United States is not paying twice as much for drugs anymore, because those costs would be to some degree pegged to the cost of other nations. Yes, good. The question is always, is it going to pass and is it going to go anywhere? But in regards to putting it forward, good. Also, using Trump's rhetoric against him, saying, you know, Donald Trump was essentially for this at one point. And that's the other part to this video. Elijah Cummings made the point that at one point Donald Trump was for this. That he saw what they wanted to do, and he gave his approval to say, get this done. Somewhere along the way between then and now, that get this done has essentially fallen away. I didn't know that. That is an amazing thing. I don't necessarily know if Cummings and Sanders has any real belief that Trump is going to act on this. At this point, Trump has just been a neocon. But I don't think he's ideologically moored, regardless of what figure he has to take on in order to do his job. In which case, he might have been initially, before people got their hooks in him, on board with the drug cost thing. And if you remember, during the campaign when he was running up for the election, he bought that out, saying we're going to peg our drug costs essentially to the cost of socialized nations, meaning countries that have socialized medicine, where they negotiate for the price and lower the price. Donald Trump doesn't want to have quote-unquote socialized medicine, but he would peg the drug costs to countries with socialized medicine. It's just utterly bizarre. But that said, he didn't go through with that. But Elijah Cummings, I guess, hope springs eternal. I'm going to just let Sanders and Cummings explain what's taking place here, because it's somewhat self-explanatory. And this is one of those things where it's good policy. If your country itself is not going to take that step where it deals with healthcare in somewhat of a responsible way, and you want to put somewhat of a patchwork in order to try to move it into a better direction, this does. This does. Let's take a look at this. Let's hear these guys do their thing.
Booker and Blumenthal, who I expect will be up in a moment.
Look at Ro Khanna. You're supposed to be on my show, buddy. You're supposed to be on my show. You're there looking peckish. I'm going to remember that forever. Just saying. I'm not bitter at all.
For being here this morning, and let me thank our friends in the House, Elijah Cummings, Ro Khanna, Jan Schakowsky, Peter Welch, Ilhan Omar, and Joe Neguse for helping lead the effort on this enormously important issue. Today we are discussing an outrage that is impacting the health and well-being of tens of millions of Americans. And that is that the people of our country pay by far, not even close, the highest prices in the world for the prescription drugs they need. That has got to end, and the legislation that we are supporting will do just that. It is totally absurd that 1 out of 5 patients in this country who get a prescription from their doctors are unable to fill that prescription because they cannot afford the price of the medicine. Think about it. People walk into a doctor's office because they are sick. Doctor diagnoses the illness, writes out a prescription, but that individual cannot get the medicine that he or she needs. And what happens? What happens is that that person will become sicker, maybe ending up in the hospital at great cost to the system. And let's be clear, sometimes that individual may die. Now, why do our people pay far more for prescription drugs than people in other countries? Why are there no restrictions on what a drug company can charge? And why is it that tomorrow the medicine that you use may be doubled or tripled in price? And the answer is simple. With a possible exception, in my view, of Wall Street, the pharmaceutical industry is the most powerful political force in this country.
Can I introduce one thing there? And I don't mean to criticize Sanders, and I'm not necessarily going to criticize him, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. I mean, it's not just drug company is a strong and powerful industry in the same way it's not just Wall Street is a strong and powerful industry. The people in Wall Street are made up of just human beings. Those human beings are incentivized to behave in a particular way based on the environment that those human beings are in. And in this, it is logical as logical can be in a capitalistic system where the goal is to maximize your profit, to be in an industry like the drug company or like the healthcare industry, where nobody is going to say, even though I have cancer, I'm not going to pay for this medication, or even though XYZ is wrong with me, I am not going to pay for the thing to fix the thing that's wrong with me. It's a relationship that's exploitive on its face. Somebody needs insulin, and you jack up the price of insulin overnight to twice as much, not because there was a need for it to be that high, not because manufacturing costs is that much, but purely because that's how much profit you can extract out of a population base that requires the drug. This is a magnificently exploitive relationship on its face, and we should not allow this. Now, my point to this, it goes beyond just the drug companies. It goes into the root of how our economic system is organized. That's just the good capitalists that's doing that. The thing that Bernie Sanders is complaining about, saying it's the drug companies. No, they're just good capitalists. They found an exploitive relationship, and they go to exploit that particular relationship while trying to have a fig leaf of not being all that craven. They are. I mean, anybody who Bernie Sanders put in that particular spot is going to advocate for policies to try to essentially allow them more profit and allow them more of latitude in order to extract profit out of the population base. It is natural and is logical for them to do that in a system that tells them that maximizing your profit is the main goal. If that is the path to doing such, then it is absolutely infinitely logical to do such. Just saying, it goes beyond just the industry itself. It goes into somewhat of a root precept or a root logic in the way that we go about our affairs in this particular capitalistic system. Just saying, it's not just the drug companies and they're bad. It's those drug companies are made up of people who've been incentivized to function a particular way and move in a particular direction for their own personal self-gain. Their self-gain just so happens to be the cancer, the AIDS, the broken bones, the contusions, the whatever else ills and foibles that afflict you as a human being trying to get from point A to point B between life and death. Let's keep going.
They have spent more than $4 billion in lobbying and campaign contributions over the past 20 years. and they have hired some 1,400 lobbyists.
Cory Booker looks particularly angry about this. I don't know if he's mean mugging the camera for a political thing of saying, look how angry I was back there about how they were fleecing the American public. I just wanted to punch a drug company. I don't know what's going on in his head back there, but he's looking really angry. I'm just saying. Yeah, let's keep going. I'm sorry.
Often former leaders of our two major parties.
Oh, one last thing. Not the last thing, but if they're paying $4 billion in order to lobby, they're not paying their $4 billion without an intention of getting the money back. You wouldn't pay $4 billion. That's a ton of money. If you weren't going to get anything in return for the $4 billion, you're doing it because you realize paying the $4 billion is cheaper in order to get political influence, as opposed to having legislation like Medicare for All or drug costs being restrained go into effect. The $4 billion is to buy and bribe politicians. That bribery of politicians essentially prevents certain policies that will adversely affect their costs in other ways. They're being bought. That's my point. And that should just be clear from the point of them investing that $4 billion that way.
To fight for their profits. In other words, they own Washington. While Americans cannot afford the prescription drugs they desperately need, the pharmaceutical industry year after year makes huge profits and pays an outrageous level of compensation to their CEOs. Last year, 5 largest drug companies in America made nearly $60 billion in profit, while the top 5 pharmaceutical industry CEOs made over $113 million in total compensation in 2017.
And just so we're clear, that's on our backs. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. A system with a Medicare for All and a restraint on drug companies allowing Medicare to negotiate the price of drugs, that costs plummets. They know that costs plummets. Maybe you couldn't put $60 billion in your pocket at that point, because maybe I don't want you putting $60 billion. Because the fact that you're getting $60 billion meaning you're getting it off of our population. We pay twice as much for drug costs. And what Sanders is saying here, meaning the politicians being bought, the legislation and so forth being essentially stymied in Washington, with a certain status quo that just perpetuates itself with these guys making billions of dollars in profit. They're being bought. That's essentially what he's saying. They are being bought. And their profits are coming off of your backs, your pains, your labors.
And I can give you many, many examples, just one. The former CEO of Gilead, John Martin, became a billionaire by charging people with hepatitis C $1,000 for a pill that cost $1 to manufacture. Now, I suspect that every member up here and every member of Congress, every day, hears stories from their constituents about the high cost of prescription drugs. Let me just read one, just one. Nicole Smith Holt from Minnesota writes, quote, "My son Alec died from diabetic ketoacidosis from rationing his insulin. He gave his life because he couldn't afford his insulin. I assumed that Alec's situation was an isolated one. I didn't realize how corrupt the system was." 50 miles from my home in Burlington, Vermont, many of the same medications manufactured by the same companies in the same factories are available for a fraction of the price that Americans pay. Just a few examples. Januvia, the diabetes drug, costs over $1,300 in the United States, but just $376 in Canada. The EpiPen costs $637 in the United States, $250 in Canada. All over this country, people are asking a simple question. How many Americans have to get sick? How many Americans have to die before Congress is prepared to take on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry? The American people are demanding that Congress listen to their concerns and not the power of the pharmaceutical industry. And today, we do that. We do that with three major pieces of legislation that would substantially reduce prescription drug prices in this country and also save the federal government significant sums of money. And I'm not going to go into it at length because the members of Congress here will discuss them at greater length. But one of them is the Prescription Drug Price Relief Act, which says that in America we should not be paying more than the people in other countries. The Medicare Drug Price Negotiation Act says that we have to use the clout of Medicare to negotiate fair prices with the pharmaceutical industry. The Affordable and Safe Prescription Drug Importation Act says that with so many advocates of unfettered free trade, yes, pharmacists and distributors should be able to bring lower cost prescription drugs into this country. Let me conclude by saying this. As many of you know, President Trump over and over again has talked about the high cost of prescription drugs. During his campaign, he said that he was going to stop the pharmaceutical companies from, quote, getting away with murder, end quote. Well, today, I say to President Trump, if you are serious about lowering prescription drug costs in this country, support our legislation and get your Republican colleagues on board. Thank you. Let me now introduce a guy who has been working on this issue for years, doing a fantastic job in the House, Elijah Cummings.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator Sanders, and I am honored to be here with my distinguished colleagues, all of whom have worked very, very hard and have been at the leadership with regard to this very important issue. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today along with many advocates who are pushing hard for lowering the price of prescription drugs in our country. I've been investigating the skyrocketing prices of drugs since 2011 for both generic and brand name drugs. I've held hearings. The effects that this can have of these skyrocketing prices can have. I cannot help but think about when I was in the hospital for 6 months. And after about about a month in there, a lady came to me who I had met in the hospital, and she said, I'm getting out today. I said, oh, that's wonderful. And I said, Miss Mary, give me your information. I'm going to write you a note, keep up with you. And then she started crying. And I said, why are you crying? She said, well, I came here to Hopkins. They had to give me the treatment. I got the operation. She said, I'm crying because I cannot afford the cure. Can't afford the cure. And so a poll found that 1 in 5 Americans reported not filling a prescription due to the high cost, just like that lady at Johns Hopkins. Another study found that most widely used brand name drugs have more than doubled in price since 2006. America, I say that we are better than that. So,
no, we're not. We're not. I'm sorry. I mean, what we could be is a separate thing from what we actually are. What we actually are is a country that they were saying that was doubling the costs of medications that people needed within the course of, 8 years. That's amazing. Doubling the cost of most drugs. That's amazing. Let's keep going. But yes, that's exactly who we are, Elijah Cummings. You can't sugarcoat it. Reality is reality. It is what it is. Capitalistic system.
So today I'm here to reintroduce the Medicare Drug Price Negotiation Act, co-led by my friends Representative Welch and Doggett, to allow Medicare to negotiate prices directly with drug companies. I'm also reintroducing the Affordable and Safe Prescription Drug Importation Act to allow Americans to buy safe, affordable prescription drugs from other countries. These bills are important because it's time to provide much-needed relief to the American people. Ladies and gentlemen, and I say to the President, no more talk, no more tweet, no more commotion, emotion, and motion and no results. The American people want action. They should not have to decide between paying their bills or paying for prescription drugs. And I say again, we're better than that. We need real and immediate action to lower drug prices in this country. And finally, the American people deserve that. And I too say to the President, you claim that you want to help Americans, and as I told you, Mr. President, in your office, Americans do not want government to hurt them. Americans want government to help them. And this is something that you can do to help all Americans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Booker?
I missed the story where Elijah Cummings was talking about being in their office and Trump was saying he's all for it, get to work on it.
I, along with Representative Welch, even met with the president.
Right here.
About a year and a half ago. We went to the White House early in the president's first year. We gave him the same bill that we are introducing today, the Medicare Drug Price Negotiation Act. We asked for his endorsement. We simply asked for his support. We simply asked him to do what he had already promised America he would do. He initially said that he would support the legislation. As a matter of fact, he told then Secretary Price to make it happen. But since then, ladies and gentlemen, we have had radio silence. America cannot afford radio silence when it comes to this issue. And unfortunately, there hasn't been any progress since then. And it's
could have had something to do with you guys calling him a Russian stooge for the past 2 years. I could imagine that would screw up your relationship with the person who you're accusing to be essentially a Russian plant. I have a bet with Sarah Reynolds on this, because Sarah Reynolds she's an odd duck on some of this stuff. She's a Bernie supporter, but she's also a Trump supporter. And she was making this argument that she thinks Trump will support something like a Medicare for all or something like a drug bill like this. I am dramatically skeptical. I understand that they're putting out this legislation, some because they want to beef up their bona fides, like Cory Booker, that's standing back there. And some are true believers. I think Rokan is a true believer, and I think Sanders and maybe even Cummings is a true believer on this point. But it doesn't go anywhere. Like, it's one thing if Trump supported it, and does Trump support bringing on the rest of the Republicans to support some kind of version of this bill that lowers some drug costs and sets some prices? Doesn't look like it. At least going by the way it's been going. But up to this point, you never know what Trump concessions that they may make going into the next presidential cycle. And these guys are actually running a campaign on whether or not they're going to support stuff like this. Medicare for all was the number one issue, or healthcare was the number one issue on people's agenda. So maybe, but I am skeptical. Jinho Choi, Sarah Reynolds is pragmatic, my brother. We will see if Sarah Reynolds' predictions become reality. Sarah Reynolds has bet me, I think it's like $50. I think we have like 3 bets going. One is if Sanders and Trump running in the election, I say Bernie Sanders will beat the stuffing out of Donald Trump. She thinks the other way. And the other prediction, when I think it's Medicare for all. We wrote these things down somewhere. But there's no way. There is no way that Donald Trump is going to support something like that. I don't see it. At all. They should put it in the wall deal. Oh, right. All right. It's like, look, we'll support your wall if you support the healthcare deal. I don't think he has any ideological opposition to healthcare. I don't believe it at all. I think you would get certain things that Trump would say in these kind of excited utterances that the people who he's around beat out of him because he's running in the other party. Left to his own devices, would Trump pivot and say, yes, let's pass healthcare legislation like this to lower drug costs? He keeps bringing it up. Whether or not he would affect that is a different thing than whether or not he's okay with that. And I'm saying he's likely okay with that in the same way that he was likely okay with bringing troops out of Syria. And then you have the other people around him who's kind of talking to him to try to bring him down from that particular position. I don't think this is going to go anywhere from a party reason. Trump left his devices, and if he wasn't called the Russian stooge every day on the news for the last 2 years, would he be more inclined to support something like this? I don't know. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. The left is too fractured, and no candidate, Democrat or the left in general, could beat Trump at this point. Yeah, that part I disagree with you on. I don't think he is. So, I agree with you that the left is fractured. Yes. So, do you know that when Obama ran against Clinton, there were more people from percentage basis that decided that they weren't going to vote for Obama, that were Clinton supporters, than Bernie supporters that chose not to support Hillary Clinton. Meaning, despite all of the nonsense that took place in the 2016 election, you still had a majority of Sanders supporters still support Clinton on this. Whether the left is fractured or not, you would need a certain number of people on the left that decide that they don't want to be in the political process. Because the person who they want didn't necessarily get through or something to that effect. I don't know if you have a number that way. If that makes sense. Like, I don't know if the numbers are that high. And let's be honest, it depends on the candidate. It really does depend on the candidate. The Democrat, if actually had values, could get anything they wanted passed if they just give him the damn wall. So that's interesting. So assume that for the moment. Say you have Democrats backing this bill. Let's assume it for the moment. Let's assume you have enough Democratic support that in the House you could pass this legislation. If they told Trump, we'll give you the wall, but we also need to throw in funding for this, would he give him the wall? That's fascinating. That's fascinating. That is fascinating. Hell, even Hillary had to not go to the Midwest for Trump to win in 2016. He's never been that good. Yeah, Trump barely won this last election. Like, he beat the stuffing out of Hillary Clinton from the standpoint of a electoral college victory. And yeah, he won the elections in the Midwest, but the Republican Party, even with the suppressed level of voting in that last election, they still had to bleed out the vote in certain states, suppress the vote in others. And the candidate was Hillary Clinton. I still say a ham sandwich could have won that race against Donald Trump. Yeah. Let's see. Country is going to shit under Trump. He would lose badly to Bernie. Yeah, I think he would lose badly to Bernie too, Edward Klein. Feminist News Network. Gerrymandering let Trump win. And that's the other thing. Gerrymandering helped Trump win. The biggest aggravation. Yeah, the biggest aggravation I get with the Russia stuff, saying Russia did it, Russia did it, Russia did it, is that there are local factors that were more instrumental in Hillary Clinton winning than other factors. Like the voter suppression was a big deal. That was a massive deal in some of those areas. The gerrymandering in the country itself allows Republicans to kind of instantiate their gains, even though more people are supporting Democrats on this stuff. It's not to mention Operation Crosscheck, where they were able to bleed X number of people off the post, tens of thousands of people off the post. If you're looking for a reason of why she lost, other than being Hillary Clinton, and other than having a federal investigation that is essentially stalking her as she was going about her way, and other than her should have been locked up over that federal investigation, if that federal investigation was being fair. I mean, there's a list of reasons for Clinton, but it's closer to home. It's not the Russians. Not presidential elections, Bob. I don't mean for presidential elections. I just mean for Democrats in general when they're trying to get into office. That's what I mean by gerrymandering. As for Operation Crosscheck, that definitely has something to do with the presidential election. Representative from Maryland did H.R. 1 Monday to bring back Voting Rights Act and stop gerrymandering. Will Trump sign that? No. Trump has no reason to sign that. Just saying, he has no reason to sign that. Keep in mind, the Republican Party is benefiting off of gerrymandering. It allows them to keep certain gains in certain branches of government. The House would have been Democrats long before now if it wasn't for those districts being gerrymandered. As for the voter suppression in places like Georgia and Wisconsin and the number of people being bled off the votes, that had more of an impact if you're looking for local stuff, not the Russians. The Russian thing is so aggravating to me because it allows them a reason by which to attack the left and attack the left through social media and all this other stuff. It's nonsense. The president's rating go up when they start wars. It depends, Danny. It depends. Like, it depends about the war. Like, so George Bush starts a war attacking Iraq, saying they have weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. I agree with you that the American public, for the most part, is odd in the amnesia that they seem to experience when they hit one situation after the next after the next. But him going into that war, the first Bush, when he went into the war in Iraq, he was hailed a hero in that war. His approval rating went through the roof. But that was somewhat of a quote-unquote clean war. The second Bush, when he went into Iraq, it became a fuckfest, and his polling numbers plummeted. When he first went in, though, his polling numbers were rather high because he could say shock and all and, you know, look at us kicking ass and everything else. The moment they got mired into this kind of Vietnam-esque back and forth, his numbers dropped. If you remember, Bush left with 30% approval rating. If Donald Trump starts the war with Iran, his numbers, I don't think you're going to get the same bounce. A, Iran didn't attack us. B, there was an Iran missile deal that Trump was the only one to pull out of. People tend to know that. At least I think people know that. Even if they don't know all the details, they know Donald Trump pulled out of a deal that was essentially preventing some kind of conflict with Iran. Will people rally behind Trump if he attacks Iran? I'm skeptical, man. I'm skeptical. Bernie Sanders was running in 2020 if only to prevent Hillary Clinton's term. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Bush Jr. went from 51% to 90% when he declared war on Iraq. When he declared war on Iraq. When he declared it. But he declared it after 9/11. If you remember, the country was in the context of 9/11. And Bush had pointed the finger at Iraq, making it a connection that really didn't exist between Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden. That was the context. The president got people to rally around him at that point because from the standpoint of the American public, Bush has identified who was responsible for attacking us on 9/11, and we are administering the justice of God on these people. But once that was realized that that was nonsense, that Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with it, that he was torturing and all this other stuff, once the stuff started coming to light and this war started to drag on, his approval ratings plummeted. Like I said, he left with a 30% approval rating. So, just saying. Just saying. Trump's manufacturing a crisis right now. He's trying to. Oh, God. Sanders was useful as a way to poke Hillary in the eye, but I expect him to find some way to back out and bow down by the convention. It was in the deal. See the Podesta emails. Oh. that quote unquote deal didn't. I feel you, Bob. I feel you. What was the mass distraction? What was the mass distraction was right. All right, I'm going to end this. I may have another one for tonight. I got to be honest, I'm dragging ass. I am not used to this schedule. After being on the road for that long, like being on the road for 4 months, any notion of a normal routine goes out the window. And your quote unquote normal routines tend to change depending on where you are. If you're in something like a city, then your routine is going to be a lot of walking because you're going to go from point A to point B in the city using public transportation and so forth. If your routine is, let's say, in a cottage or a house by yourself, then you're probably going to be driving from point A to point B because anything that you need at that point is going to have to be through some level of transportation. Your routine constantly changed. But the one thing that didn't change was the time zones. So being over there, you're like, 6 to 8 hours difference between the states. And so my day was still oriented around East Coast time to some degree, to a modest degree. So getting up in the morning and, let's say, starting to kind of get active around 12 in the morning means I have time to get a tea, shisha, or a tea and a sandwich, and sit out somewhere and play my show. And then by time I think it's like maybe 2 in the evening, at that point, you go through your routine. It's like 7 in the morning. So you would be doing a show from 7 in the morning to, let's say, 5 in the evening. Or maybe less. But that means that you're functioning until like 2, 3 in the morning. And you'd repeat that schedule, sometimes getting up early in the morning and then kind of burning the candle at the other end to do it in order to kind of tour or something like that. Being back in the States, there's this weird thing of like the time that you wake up is the time that you wake up because you're back in your East Coast time zone. So my shows end up going further into the night because essentially at this point, don't sleep. My not sleeping has gotten prodigiously worse. Gonna listen to you and Gordon DeMac. I like Gordon, man. Gordon is a cool guy. We always have a good conversation either when I'm on his show or when he's online. So yeah, I enjoyed the convo. We were talking about some of everything. Alright. I'm gonna end this. I feel you as a fellow insomniac. Yeah, man. It's like it was one thing when I was traveling where I would be up at all sorts of hours of the night. But in that case, it wasn't as bad if you slept further into the day because at that point when you get up, you're still on East Coast time. And after doing that for like 4 months, and you get back home, if you're staying up until, late 2, 3 into the morning, you fuck up your day because you don't get to start doing your show until later at night, which perpetuates the same thing. It forces you to, at some point, either just get up early that morning and try to fight your way throughout the day to try to get to sleep at night or something. All I know is it hasn't necessarily been working and I've been up constantly. Did you ever get real kind to speak to you, Jesus Zamora? God, I want to keep saying Jesus Zamora. It sounds more badass. I did not. His appointment setter threw their kids under the bus as an excuse to try to excuse or to explain why Rokana was unavailable and did essentially a no-show 3 or 4 times that day. 2:30, 3 o'clock, 7:30. So it's 3 times. But I think there was one more. But the answer is no. The answer is no. Alright guys, I'm going to end this. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.